The Invisible Wall. Captain Rethus Corvan had mapped 17 star systems in his 30-year career as an Altarian deep space explorer. His crystalline eyes had witnessed the birth of binary stars, the collapse of ancient civilizations, and the strange beauty of nebulae that sang in frequencies only his species could hear. But nothing had prepared him for what his sensors were showing him now. The bridge of his exploration vessel Stellar Wind hummed with the quiet efficiency of Altarian technology. Banks of bio-neural processors glowed with soft amber light, while his navigation officer, Zeta Prime 9, monitored their approach to the region marked on all galactic charts as Terran Space, Status Unknown. "Captain," Zeta Prime 9's harmonic voice carried a note of confusion. "Our forward momentum has ceased, but our engines remain at full power." Corvan's tentacles twitched with interest as he flowed closer to the main display. According to their instruments, they were moving at standard cruise velocity toward the human border. Yet the stars beyond remained at exactly the same distance. It was as if space itself was flowing backward around them, keeping them perpetually in place. "Run a full sensor sweep," he commanded, his voice carrying the subsonic undertones that marked him as a senior navigator of his clan. "Something is maintaining our position." The results appeared on the holographic display moments later. Ahead of them lay what appeared to be empty space, indistinguishable from the void they had been traveling through for days. But their sensors detected something impossible, a barrier that wasn't there. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving signals from multiple vessels. All appear to be in similar situations." Within hours, Corvan found himself in communication with representatives of 7 different species. There was Captaes in Yilix of the Nefrani Trade Confederation, whose cargo ship had been trying to deliver quantum processors to human colonies for 6 months. Commander Voss of the Hegemony Navy had been pursuing a fugitive who had reportedly fled toward human space, only to find his dreadnought unable to advance beyond an invisible line. Most disturbing was the testimony of Dr. Melindi, a Corvallan xenobiologist whose research vessel had been studying gravitational anomalies in the region. Her crew had spent 3 weeks taking detailed measurements of the barrier, only to discover that their instruments showed no barrier existed at all. "We can see human ships moving freely on the other side," she explained during their joint communication session. "Our telescopes show inhabited worlds, orbital installations, even what appears to be massive construction projects. But when we attempt to approach, our vessels simply refuse to advance." Captain Yilix's frustration was evident in the rapid color changes of his carapace. "The strangest part is the psychological effect. Every few hours I find myself convinced that I have more important business elsewhere. My crew reports the same phenomenon. We have to continuously remind ourselves why we're here." Commander Voss, ever the military professional, had attempted the most direct approach. "I ordered my weapons officer to target the barrier with our main cannon. The targeting system acquired the coordinates, but when we fired, the energy discharge simply dissipated. No explosion, no deflection. The beam acted as though it had struck nothing at all." Corvan spent 3 days comparing data with the other vessels. Every species had encountered the same phenomenon. Ships could approach to within exactly 12.7 light minutes of the nearest human system, then found themselves unable to advance further. Weapons had no effect. Probes were gently turned back. Even ramming attempts resulted in the attacking vessel finding itself traveling in the opposite direction without any memory of changing course. On the 4th day, everything changed. A massive vessel dropped out of hyperspace near their improvised flotilla. It was a ship Corvan recognized from his academy studies, a Council diplomatic cruiser, one of the few vessels authorized to travel freely throughout all galactic territories. The communication came immediately. "This is Ambassador Thylex of the Galactic Coordination Council. All vessels are ordered to maintain their current positions and prepare to receive diplomatic personnel." Ambassador Thylex was ancient even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her form shifted constantly between states of matter, a sign of extreme age among the energy-based Zephyrians. When she materialized on Corvan's bridge, her presence carried the weight of millennia. Captain Corvan, she said, her voice resonating directly in his mind, you and your fellow explorers have encountered something that very few beings in the galaxy are authorized to know about. I am here to offer you a choice. Corvan felt his crew tense around him. In galactic politics, when a council ambassador spoke of choices, the alternatives were rarely pleasant. What kind of choice, Ambassador? You may return to your respective territories and report that this region of space contains dangerous gravitational anomalies that make exploration impossible. Your governments will accept this explanation and will not press for further investigation. Or, her form flickered with what might have been amusement, you may accompany me to Council Space and learn the truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. The other captains accepted the invitation immediately. The promise of solving the mystery of human space was too tempting for any true explorer to resist. Within hours, all 8 vessels had formed a convoy following the Council ship toward the massive space station that served as the galaxy's diplomatic center. The journey took 2 weeks. During that time, Ambassador Thylex remained silent about their destination, but Corvan noticed that their route took them through some of the oldest regions of mapped space. They passed through systems where the first galactic civilizations had risen and fallen, where monuments to forgotten empires drifted in the eternal darkness. Council Station was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Billions of beings from hundreds of species had worked together to create a structure that could accommodate every known form of life. The central hub alone was larger than most moons, with specialized environments ranging from the methane atmospheres preferred by the Gorinth to the high radiation zones where the crystalline Nexari thrived. Corvan had never been to Council Space before. Few beings ever were. As their ship docked at one of the hundreds of receiving bays, he felt the weight of history around him. This was where the great decisions of galactic civilization were made, where the fate of entire species was determined. The council chamber they were brought to was unlike anything in Corvan's experience. It was a sphere nearly a kilometer in diameter, with no fixed orientation. Delegate platforms floated freely in the space, allowing representatives of radically different species to interact despite vast differences in size, environment, and sensory perception. At the center of the sphere waited 3 beings that made Corvan's tentacles curl with instinctive respect. These were the Elder Council, representatives of the 3 oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. Their species had been exploring the stars when Corvan's ancestors were still learning to use tools. Elder Morvac of the Primarch spoke first. His voice carried harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal space, a side effect of his people's mastery of hyperspatial technology. Explorers of the younger races, you have encountered the boundaries of human space. What you experienced was not an accident, nor was it a hostile act. It is a service that humanity provides to the entire galaxy. Elder Tessith of the Void. Walkers materialized next to him, her quantum-shifted form barely visible in normal space. 400 years ago, we made first contact with a species called humanity. They were young, curious, and possessed of technologies we had never encountered. Most remarkably, they displayed an unusual resistance to certain cosmic phenomena that had plagued our civilizations for millennia. The third elder, Korthax of the Deep Builders, spoke in the subsonic frequencies that his species used for their most formal communications. Humanity requested permission to establish colonies in a region of space that we had long avoided. When we asked why they chose such a dangerous area, they told us something that changed our understanding of the galaxy forever. Ambassador Thylex gestured, and the chamber filled with a holographic display showing the galaxy as it appeared 4 centuries ago. Vast sections were marked in warning colors, labeled as unexplorable or hazardous to all known life forms. Humans, it seemed, were immune to the effects that made these regions deadly, Elder Morvac continued. More than immune, they could actively counteract the phenomena that made exploration impossible. Within 50 years, humanity had established colonies throughout the danger zones, pushing back the boundaries of the unexplorable regions. Corvan felt a chill run through his nervous system. What kind of phenomena? Elder Tessith's form flickered with what might have been remembered fear. There are things in the darkness between stars that hunger for consciousness itself, ancient remnants of civilizations that transcended physical existence only to become something far worse than death. We called them the Void Stalkers, and for millions of years they have been slowly expanding their influence throughout the galaxy. The holographic display changed, showing the current galactic map. The danger zones had shrunk dramatically, now concentrated entirely within the region known as human space. Elder Korthax's massive form shifted with agitation. Humanity discovered that they possessed a natural resistance to the Stalkers' influence. More than that, they could actively fight back against entities that had been considered unstoppable forces of nature. But this ability came at a cost. What cost? Commander Voss demanded, his military training making him focus on tactical implications. Ambassador Thylex answered. Humans who fought the Stalkers for extended periods began to change, not physically but mentally and spiritually. They developed abilities that allowed them to manipulate reality in ways that made even the elder races nervous. The first generation of human void fighters could bend space and time through pure will. The second generation could alter the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas. Elder Morvax's harmonics took on a grave tone. By the third generation, humanity realized what they were becoming. The same forces that made them effective against the Stalkers were transforming them into something beyond mortal comprehension. They made a choice that has defined galactic civilization ever since. The chamber fell silent, except for the subtle vibrations of the station's life support systems. Captain Korvan found himself holding his breath, afraid to break the moment. They withdrew, Elder Tessith said simply. All human colonies, all human ships, all human representatives returned to their designated space. They erected barriers that would prevent not only others from entering their territory, but also prevent themselves from easily leaving it. They became the galaxy's guardians, fighting a war that no other species could survive, while simultaneously protecting us from the knowledge of what they had become in order to wage that war. The weight of the revelation settled over the assembled explorers like a physical force. Korvan felt his worldview restructuring itself around this new information. Everything he had been taught about the galaxy, about the safe zones and the danger areas, about humanity's mysterious isolation, all of it had been a carefully constructed lie designed to protect civilization itself. The barriers you encountered, Ambassador Thylex explained, serve a dual purpose. They keep the curious out, preventing other species from accidentally stumbling into contact with beings who have transcended normal existence, and they keep the transformed humans contained, ensuring that their altered nature doesn't accidentally influence the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Melindy's research instincts overcame her shock. But we can see them. Our telescopes show normal human activity on their worlds. Elder Korthax made a sound that might have been laughter if his species possessed such an emotion. What you see are images from 400 years ago, carefully maintained and updated by automated systems. The humans you observe are echoes, phantoms created by technology so advanced that it might as well be magic. The real humanity dwells in spaces between dimensions, fighting battles against enemies that exist outside the normal flow of time. Captain Yilix's carapace had shifted to the deep purple that indicated profound confusion among his people. If this is true, then why maintain the illusion? Why not tell the galaxy the truth? All three elders responded simultaneously, their combined voices creating harmonics that made the chamber itself resonate. Because the truth would destroy everything we have built. The Watchers in the Dark. Dr. Elena Vasquez carefully adjusted the quantum resonance scanner as she approached the artifact. 3 months of excavation on this nameless world had revealed the remnants of a civilization that predated the current galactic community by millions of years. But this particular find was different. Where previous discoveries had yielded artwork, technology, or cultural artifacts, this structure radiated a wrongness that made her enhanced human senses recoil. The archaeological site lay deep beneath the surface of a world that existed in the spaces between normal dimensions. To outside observers, Elena's location would appear as empty void, but humanity had learned to build in places that other species couldn't even perceive. The excavation dome around her was a marvel of human engineering, maintaining a bubble of normal space-time in an area where the fundamental laws of physics were more like suggestions. "Elena," came a voice from her communicator. "The resonance readings are spiking again. Are you sure it's safe to proceed?" She smiled grimly as she recognized the concern in Commander Marcus Chen's voice. Marcus had been her partner in both professional and personal matters for over a century, though the concept of linear time had become somewhat flexible for humans who spent their lives fighting entities that existed outside temporal flow. "Nothing about this job has ever been safe, Marcus," she replied, running her scanner over the artifact's surface. "But this might be the breakthrough we've been looking for." The object before her was approximately 3 meters tall and seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. Its surface shifted constantly between states of matter, sometimes appearing as polished metal, other times as crystallized energy, occasionally becoming something that her brain refused to categorize. But the scanner readings were unmistakable. This was Void Stalker technology, but unlike any they had encountered before. Elena had been born in the 4th generation of humanity's transformation. Unlike her predecessors, who had developed their abilities through exposure to stalker influence, she had been engineered from birth to interface with the technologies and entities that dwelt in the spaces between realities. Her enhanced senses could perceive 11 dimensions simultaneously, while her augmented mind could process information at speeds that would burn out an unmodified human brain in microseconds. "The resonance pattern is unlike anything in our databases," she reported, her fingers dancing over controls that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "It's not a weapon, not a tool. I think it's a recording device." Marcus materialized beside her, his form shifting through several phases of existence before settling into something approximately human-shaped. The transformation process had affected him more dramatically than Elena. Where she retained most of her original physical form, Marcus had become something that could assume human appearance when necessary, but was more comfortable existing as a pattern of organized energy. "A recording device?" His voice carried harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "Recording what?" Elena interfaced directly with the scanner, her consciousness expanding to encompass the quantum field fluctuations around the artifact. The experience was always disorienting, like suddenly being able to see colors that had no names, but it was the only way to properly analyze stalker technology. What she found made her retreat immediately back to normal consciousness. "Marcus," she whispered, her enhanced physiology unable to entirely suppress the primitive fear response. "This isn't just a recording, it's a message, and it's addressed to humanity." The implications hit them both simultaneously. The Void Stalkers were ancient beyond measure, predating human civilization by eons. They had been expanding their influence throughout the galaxy for millions of years, before the first human had ever looked up at the stars. There should be no way they could have known humanity would eventually develop the ability to fight them, unless they had encountered humans before. Elena and Marcus worked together to activate the artifact, their combined abilities allowing them to interface with technology that operated according to physics that shouldn't exist. The message that emerged wasn't transmitted in any conventional sense. Instead, it impressed itself directly onto their consciousness, becoming part of their knowledge as if they had always known it. The revelation was staggering. Humanity wasn't the first species to develop resistance to stalker influence. Throughout the galaxy's history, roughly every 50 million years, a species would evolve the necessary traits to fight back against the entities that fed on consciousness and reality itself. Each time, that species would face the same choice humanity had confronted: transform themselves to fight the stalkers, or watch the galaxy be consumed by entities that existed to unmake creation itself. Every previous species had chosen transformation, and everyone had eventually become something so far removed from their original nature that they themselves became a threat to normal space-time. The galaxy was lit. aired with the remnants of civilizations that had transcended their physical existence, only to discover that transcendence without wisdom led to power without purpose. Every previous species had chosen transformation, and every one had eventually become something so far removed from their original nature that they themselves became a threat to normal space-time. The galaxy was littered with the remnants of civilizations that had transcended their physical existence, only to discover that transcendence without wisdom led to power without purpose. The Stalkers, it seemed, were not the galaxy's original enemy. They were the remnants of the first species to make the choice, transformed so completely by their battle against an even more ancient threat that they had become predators feeding on the very thing they had once sought to protect, consciousness itself. Elena felt Marcus's presence in her mind as they processed the information together. The connection between their transformed consciousness allowed them to share thoughts and emotions directly, an intimacy that would have been impossible for baseline humans. "The cycle," Marcus whispered, his realization rippling through their shared awareness. "It never ends. Every species that gains the power to fight the Stalkers eventually becomes the next generation of Stalkers." But the message contained more than just historical data. It included detailed information about the entities that existed beyond even the Stalkers, the original corruption that had started the cycle millions of years ago. These beings existed in a state so removed from normal reality that they could only be described as mathematical concepts given malevolent will. They fed on the concept of existence itself, slowly unmaking the universe one conscious thought at a time. Elena accessed the human collective database, her mind interfacing with the shared knowledge of her species. What she found confirmed their worst fears. The barriers that humanity had erected around their space weren't just containing their own transformation. They were holding back something far worse. "The deep scans from Sector 7, she said aloud, though Marcus was already accessing the same data through their connection. "The reality fluctuations we've been tracking, they're not random." Marcus's form solidified as his attention focused on the tactical implications. "The source entities are testing the barriers. They've been probing for weaknesses for the past 50 years. The source entities were humanity's name for the original corruption, the mathematical concepts that sought to reduce all existence to null values. Earth scientists had detected their influence shortly after humanity began its transformation, but had assumed they were a distant threat that could be addressed once the Stalker problem was resolved. Now it became clear that the Stalkers had been serving as an unintentional buffer, their hunger for consciousness actually protecting reality from the far more fundamental threat of the source entities. By containing and fighting the Stalkers, humanity had unknowingly removed one of the galaxy's primary defenses against something far worse. Elena pulled up the current tactical situation on her multi-dimensional display. Throughout human space, modified humans fought constant battles against Stalker incursions, preventing the entities from expanding beyond their contained territories. But now she could see the larger pattern. Every Stalker they destroyed weakened the barrier that held back the source entities. "We're caught in a trap," she realized. "If we stop fighting the Stalkers, they'll consume the galaxy. If we continue fighting them, we'll eventually create an opening for the source entities to break through." Marcus considered the options, his enhanced mind running calculations across multiple probability matrices simultaneously. "There's a third choice," he said finally, "but it requires us to reveal the truth to the galactic community." Elena felt the weight of that decision. For 400 years, humanity had maintained the lie that they were simply another spacefaring species that had chosen isolation. The barriers around human space were explained away as technological quarantine measures, while the modified humans who fought in the spaces between dimensions were kept hidden from galactic view. The truth was that humanity had become something that transcended normal existence. They had developed the ability to manipulate reality at its most fundamental levels, to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, and to fight entities that operated according to physics that didn't apply to normal space-time. But they had also retained their essential humanity. their connection to the values and relationships that had defined their species before the transformation. "If we tell them the truth," Elena said, "it will change everything. The galactic community isn't ready to know that reality itself is under attack by forces they can't even comprehend." "And if we don't tell them," Marcus replied, "they'll continue to assume that human space is simply another territory to be mapped and explored. Eventually, someone will find a way through the barriers, and their unprotected consciousness will be exposed to influences that could transform them into something we might not be able to contain." They worked together to compile a comprehensive report of their findings. The artifact's message had included tactical data about the source entities, information about the stalker's true nature, and most importantly, projections about the timeline before the barriers would no longer be sufficient to contain the threat. 18 months. That's how long humanity had before the mathematical certainty of the source entity's continued pressure would create fractures in the barrier system that even transformed human technology couldn't repair. Elena activated her connection to the human collective, sharing their discoveries with the distributed consciousness that guided their species' strategic decisions. The response was immediate and unanimous. The galactic community had to be told the truth, even if that truth destroyed the careful balance that had protected the galaxy for 4 centuries. Commander Marcus Chen took on the task of composing the message that would be transmitted to the Galactic Council. It was a delicate balance between revelation and reassurance, explaining the true nature of the threats facing the galaxy, while emphasizing humanity's commitment to containing them. To the representatives of the galactic community, the message began: "Humanity has maintained our isolation, not from fear of other species, but from responsibility for their protection. For 400 years we have served as guardians against forces that exist beyond normal space-time, entities that feed on consciousness and seek to unmake the fundamental structure of reality itself." The message went on to explain the true nature of the barriers, the transformation humanity had undergone, and the critical importance of maintaining the quarantine zones. But it also included an offer of cooperation, a proposal for joint research into methods of strengthening the barriers and eventually finding a permanent solution to the threat. Elena watched as the transmission was encoded into formats that could traverse the dimensional boundaries around human space. Within hours, it would reach the Galactic Council, forcing them to confront the reality that their safe, mapped galaxy existed only because an entire species had sacrificed their normal existence to fight a war that could never truly be won. As the message was transmitted, Elena felt a profound sense of both hope and dread. Hope that the galaxy's combined knowledge and resources might lead to new solutions for containing the source entities. Dread that the revelation might destroy the careful balance that had protected billions of sentient beings from the knowledge of just how fragile their existence really was. But as she stood in the excavation dome, surrounded by artifacts from a civilization that had faced the same choice millions of years ago, Elena knew that humanity had made the right decision. The truth was frightening, but it was also the first step toward breaking the cycle that had trapped species after species in the same pattern of transformation and ultimate corruption. Marcus materialized beside her one final time before they prepared to return to the defensive installations deeper in human space. "Do you think they'll accept it?" he asked. "The truth about what we've become and what we're fighting?" Elena smiled, her enhanced senses already detecting the quantum fluctuations that indicated stalker probes testing the barriers. "They don't have to accept it," she said. "They just have to survive long enough for us to find a better solution." As they prepared to leave the archaeological site, Elena took one last look at the Void Stalker artifact. Its surface continued to shift through dimensions that had no names, a reminder that reality itself was far more complex and fragile than most beings realized. But it was also a testament to the possibility of understanding, of finding patterns and meaning, even in the chaos that existed beyond normal space. Humanity would continue their watch in the darkness between dimensions, fighting battles against enemies that most species couldn't even perceive. But now they wouldn't fight alone. The galaxy was about to learn that its borders didn't end at space, and that the greatest threats came not from other civilizations, but from the fundamental forces that sought to reduce all existence to empty void. The message had been sent. The truth was finally being revealed. And somewhere in the depths of human space, modified humans prepared for the day when the barriers would no longer be necessary, when the galaxy would be strong enough to face the darkness on its own terms. Until then, they would continue to be the silent guardians, the watchers in the dark, the species that had chosen to become something beyond human in order to ensure that humanity itself would have a future worth protecting.